Welcome, friends. My guest today really needs no introduction, especially with my audience. Having said that, Sacha is a pioneer. He's a visionary. He is a warrior on the front line for truth. That's become quite clear in the past 2 years, or especially the past 2 years. Sacha is a public speaker, a publisher, a writer, and filmmaker. Sacha is involved with various projects. He's the founder of the New Earth Sanctuary in Bali and now Mexico. He's the organizer of the Lazarus Initiative, Arise Guerrilla News. He's the founder of Humanitad and also the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, the Regenesis Retreats, and Sacha was the organizer of the World Health Sovereignty Summit in Bali. I think that was 2019, exposing crimes against humanity, especially in the past 2.5 years. Welcome, Sacha.
Thank you, Mark. Very kind words. I'd love to meet the chap you just introduced. Sounds interesting.
I've been looking forward to meeting you too, actually. You're involved with various projects at any given time. Ambitious projects from anyone looking in from the outside. What's the driving force? What drives you? What's the motivation behind constantly being active in this way, as a public figure, as a public servant?
Pissed offness is the is the rudiment there. I think for any human being to awaken to this world, blinking into the daylight, having freshly popped out of your mother's womb, as soon as cogitation emerges and you're able to kind of apply what you remember at the soul level as what being should be about, what life should be about, what affirmation should be about. You come into this world, blinking into it, and see the travesty unfold from a very young age. From the minute you bang your head into a fucking piece of wooden furniture, to when you get roundly beaten by bullies in the schoolyard, which I was never bullied, but I'm speaking to those people who are victimized in life, and all too many are, to the way that parents and family butcher our natural-born sensibilities and mutate them, foot binding, mind binding, all of that. With the best will in the world, we just get mind fucked from birth till death, and in between we get harvested, for life force, which is taxes and which is time and motion. And I just really reached a point when I was in my mid-20s. I just really had enough, and also skirting somewhat too closely to the devil's playground in rock and roll and in that kind of celebrity false light bullshit. Also gave me a bit of a wake up call. It was a clarion call for me. You choose, boy. You take a left fork in the road, or you take a right fork in the road. And I took the path that I'm on now, which was just to seek remedy and to put whatever pissed offness, anger I had, and alchemize it into consciousness in action, in simple terms. That's it. All it is. And then once I began that journey, the best part of over 20 years ago, you find that it's a journey that you can't undo. You can't retrace your steps. You know this, Mark. You're also on the front line. You're also an activist, an advocate for pure truth and right action and remedy. You can't walk the walk once you're on it. And if you try to, dear God, I hate to think what the blowback would be. But I do know that we carry protections with us so long as we walk through the valley of death,
There's a real responsibility that comes with awareness. And you've stepped up to that responsibility.
Well, I've owned my own part in the theater, for sure, and possibly I've owned a bit more of it, because when I say that, what I mean is when one engages a service, and I've said this multiple times at risk of boring your audience, service to self or service to others, well, you learn on the noble path that service to others is actually the highest service to self as well. It's how we sharpen that inner lens and become greater than we were born to be. So, you've got a fated line, and we're fated to have a shitty life and die of terminal cancer at 53 or whatever. But we also have a line that we can transmute and transcend the fated line into the higher outcome. I call that the noble path. It's the path less tread. It hurts. There's a lot of shamanic rite of passage that one needs to get through and survive in order to take that noble path. But when you do, it's about giving more than you take. In simple terms, the highest yield comes to those who give more than they take. And there's the crushing irony, because the Atlantean model of reality tells us, no, if you take more than you give, then you have a profit, and doesn't work that way.
Well, the whole thing is twisted. It's a backwards satanic inversion.
Yes.
And, the real source, this is the real source of joy, right? I mean, there's so many people who are depressed, unhappy, and it seems like they're seeking happiness as a goal, not realizing that's not the real goal. Service is the goal. And when it's almost as if that which you reject will be laid at your feet, you sacrifice your own happiness for the good of others, and then joy is the result. But you didn't set out on that path for that reason.
No, that there's truth in that. But let me say that one doesn't end up sacrificing one's happiness or joy or bliss. You're right that is part of the founding metric when you're starting on that path of service. And I remember in 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, day after day after day, I remember working till 3-4 o'clock every morning in London, and sleeping 5-6 hours, and waking up again, working again. And I was so intensely involved at that time in crafting and forging and fashioning and engineering and architecting this journey of humanitad and international fellowship between cultures and faiths and nations. And I just wanted to create remedy everywhere I went. I was a very wide-eyed and idealistic and bushy-tailed in that sense, and a complete fucking loser, because I was so idealistic, and I was just going out to be of such sanctimonious service. It hurt like hell, because the rebuffs and the rejections and the misery and the loss and that because I'd left my world, I'd left my rock and roll thing, I'd left my friends, I'd left my personal joy, I'd laid that aside. I had no choice, but I had laid it aside. So yes, there was a sacrifice in that context at that time. But what I very soon discovered within 5 years, for sure, 5 or 6 years, was that this path was where I could actually conduct my kind of shock poetry, my rock and roll. This was my fucking riff, man, on the guitar. This was my primal scream. And I was going to find that in this. And I didn't know what this was, just that I was looking for the man, and I had not found him, and I was unlikely to find him, and that I'd better fast become him. That became, in a sense, the journey, self-discovery one. It's an old, tired hero's journey, but it's one that we all need to go through, whether we know it or not. And what I can tell you is that in the last few years, subsequent, I think, to the kind of 2012 crossover thing, because whether you believe in the astrotheological and astrological relevance of those datelines or not, you can't ignore the fact that 2012 was the biggest meme in the history of modern time, and that harvests huge amounts of collective consciousness and attention. And so that dateline did manifest as a axiomatic, pivotal one for all of us in one way or the other, and for the planet at large. And I remember coming through that 2012 thing. And for the first time, 2012 was the first time I ever came out public speaking. So I had a lot to say, but prior to that, but it was 2012 when I was forced into doing it, into coming out and speaking. And I shit myself. I was terrified. The last thing I ever wanted to do was to public speak or to stand on a stage. Now, give me a guitar and let me scream, and I performed. I'm a performer, born performer in that way, but that's hiding behind.
That's hiding.
But when you strip away the apparatus and the guitars and the amplifiers and the microphones and the lip gloss
It's
and the
just
fucking
you.
big hair, it's just you, baby. And it's raw, it's naked, and it's very, very vulnerable. And that's what I had to strip myself down to that. And subsequent to doing that, to being vulnerable and being okay about taking 1,000 arrows. And Christ knows, everyone knows I take these arrows in the back all the time. The things that are said and leveled at me are just unfucking heralded.
I mean, I take them and I don't have nearly the amount of reach that you do. So obviously, and especially from big tech, censorship is something else we could talk about. Obviously, you must be over the target. I must be over the target, because I'm getting banned, shadow banned, censored, like you wouldn't believe, especially.
Oh yeah, and that's going to continue. But just to close my point, subsequent to 2012, when I did say, okay, I'm going to stand naked. Maybe I've got a big dick, maybe it's a little dick, and the world will let me know soon enough. If my voice is relevant or not. And you put yourself out there, and you say what you say, and you have to mean it, and you have to know yourself to do that. And speak to pure truth and conduct right action, which is all I've ever spoken to, those two things. I used to speak in terms of elevating time, money, and fear and blah, blah, blah. And that's true. But I've simplified the algorithm. It's pure truth, right action in the living moment is the path of least resistance to the highest outcome, always in all ways. And that's my spoken gospel. It'll never get more complex than that. And you can write that down on the back of a cigarette box. So that for me was when I started to realize that, hang on, by being vulnerable and by allowing myself to be out there and take whatever's coming, rocks at the head, whatever it is, I am able to now manifest my bliss. I'm able to now truly do that. And I can tell you now, Mark, I'm now living it. I'm living in this new earth realm. I'm surrounded by highly conscious, brilliant, innovative people, beautiful people. The conversations in my life are so stimulating. There is no one I can't get hold of and have a conversation with. I'm just blessed and blessed and blessed. And that's the net that comes out of, I now can see that initial selflessness. So it's always planting the right forest when one does seek to serve others over self, becomes not only highest service to self, but also becomes the algorithm for one's own bliss and one's own joy to actually emerge in the field. That's the mathematics I've seen play out in my life.
Yeah. Well, there's forces at work. There's a law, natural law, which is at work when we engage in these things. And it's an upward spiral when you make certain decisions. And
yes.
You are tapping into higher inspiration. What you're doing now is really the future, I believe. This new earth, because we are going to enter into a new earth, a new world. This present existence, which we've been doing for centuries now, it's just not sustainable, obviously. Tell us about the new earth sanctuary that you're working on.
It fraught with all of its usual birth pangs and ups and downs and swings to the left and swings to the right and letdowns and big moments of eureka. It's all of that stuff happening at the moment, and it's beautiful. It's taking shape very, very quickly, very powerfully. Every single day we've got calls lined up and backed up, in point of fact, for the next few months of people wanting to plug and play and bring in investment or bring in, or buy land within the sanctuary and plug out of the system and relocate assets and lives and families and kin and dreams into sanctified living soil, which is what we're dealing with here. So a huge prospect. I believe it will become the biggest exemplar in the world for full spectrum regenerative 0-point economy and social ecology, by which I mean to say the kingdom of heaven on earth, which is absent the source code of the devil, You're talking about usury, exploitation, interest-bearing, inflationary economics, parasitic enterprise of any order of magnitude, and obviously ridding the air, water, and soil and the human biome of all synthetic molecules. Because if you want to really find the true atom seed of the source code of the kingdom of the devil, you need look no further than a synthetic molecule, my friend, and the geometry contained therein. That is where Satan anchored into the earth plane and continues to conduct his Zen mastery over our lives. Let's not forget, the devil and all things devilish are there to serve our awakening. And once we've awakened to that abomination, we are able to transmute and transcend it, because we contain the angelic seeding, and we are eminently, vastly more powerful than any demonic element or force in this world. But to know it is to activate it, is to become it. And it's the knowing bit that becomes, for most people, the hard piece, because we're so mind-fucked by an entire civilizational matrix. And then, of course, the academia and entertainment and news media all conspire to this predictive programming to circumscribe into our genetics that we are useless eaters, that we have no rights outside of those allocated to us by the corporate fiction. And so it goes on. So, you know, these weaselly human beings, which look around you, all around us, weaselly little unrealized and unresolved creatures inhabiting human bodies, many of them simply walk-ins for lower elemental cloud intelligences to come in and turn you into another little technocrat or bureaucrat or soldier of fortune or functionary of this, you know, diabolical status quo. And yet, despite that, how many fucking good humans in our midst as well, really just good humans, waiting to manifest their own reckoning, their own great tribulation. That's where we find ourselves right now, Mark, and that's what's beautiful about this COVIDiocy, the end of time and the regenesis of
it's
Homo
really
luminous.
sorting everything out. It's making it plain and clear who everybody is, and everybody has to make a choice, and people are making that choice, and they have made that choice.
Yes. Yes,
is this
indeed.
the great sorting in your view?
Well, I've been saying it loud enough for long enough, and of course it is. It's the alchemical bifurcation. It's the end of days. It's the falling away of the mask, which is the apocalypse. It is Armageddon incarnate. It is the tribulation, the revelation, and the reckoning, all at the same time. And the time, of course, being the essential bit. As I'm always at pains to point out to any audience, anywhere in the world, at any time, time is the very thing that we need to transmute and transcend, because time is the anchor point of the fiction of the great Lucis, the great false light, can only anchor into this temporal realm when we take our God-given life force, attention, divine plasma, and we take it away from the living moment, from the quantum mystery, from the great unfoldment, the revelation in the here and now of the Atman, the Alpha and the Omega, that self-exists, self-reveals, self-fulfills within the atom seed of this being right here, right now, in perfect conjugation with you and your consciousness right here, right now, in conjugation with our audiences right here, right now. We are the shit, man. And taking our attention away from that into the fiction of time, and then believing in TikTok time, and then circumscribing the parameters of our existence in accordance with time and motion and watching the clock and time is money and life force harvesting and what do you do for a living, son, and what are you going to do when you grow up, son, and all of that predictive programming is literally the work of of the devil. That is how we have the golden umbilical cut of our divinity at a very young age and transposed into a false light matrix. And we do it to ourselves, and we do it to our babies, and we do it at the community level, the social. I say, this idea of community, I reject the idea of community. I reject the idea of family. I reject the idea of society. I reject the idea of culture. I reject the idea of nationalism. I reject the idea of civilization. Ultimately, I reject all collective memes, because I know, and I'm smart enough and I've hurt enough to learn that it is my pure revelation in the flame of pure truth that becomes the greatest spirit, a community spirit, the greatest social spirit. That's how we become of service to one another. But we must first engage that inner journey. All children, all babes, all kids should be brought in only to that, a remembrance of their divinity, before we start mind-fucking them and programming them with all the heinous shit that we've come up with for 3,000 years. We should listen to them, their memories, their remembrances, the song coming through their blood is that much closer to source, that much closer to the alpha. And yet they pop into this world, and what do we do to them? Immediately start to sequester them and to manipulate them. And that's us, literally us cutting the umbilical to our own divine progenesis. So once we get to grips with this and recognize that time is the fiction, is the corporation, is the government, is the Catholic Church, is the priest banker, is the parasite, is the thing, the Cronus, the titan that devours its own young. We are the young. Cronus is the crown is the state. And Cronus, of course, indicates tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. We just need to keep having this conversation until we are out of indentureship to the fiction of time, and we will see our immanent, immortal template restore and resurrect. And that I'm describing is the true revelation. That I'm describing right now, the return and restoration to the immanent, immortal template, is where we're headed right now. It is what is manifesting right now, and it is unstoppable.
It's our birthright, really, and all the forces are trying to come against that. A multi-generational indoctrination, which people are working through or not working through, really. And we've seen evidence of that in the past 2 years with the mask wearing. I went to a dentist yesterday, and I was the only one in the office without a mask. It's just amazing that they still are pushing ahead with this confounded thing.
Indeed.
You've mentioned, I listened to a couple interviews in the past few days. You talked about timelessness being fearlessness. I think it was.
Yes.
You talk about that?
Yes, indeed. Thank you for the beautiful question. Wow, this is so my subject, and what gives me great joy. He said, looking at butterflies dancing on the bluebells out there. Timelessness is where we tap into our sovereignty. And by that, I don't want to get too enigmatic in the conversation, but where one has consciously disidentified from the fiction of time as it relates to the cannibalizing of one's own life force in this temporal realm, which brings about the abdication of our divine sovereignty and the abnegation of our Christed natural-born rights and liberties. You see, we are the ones who, through that indentureship to the idea of time, which again is government and money and fear, we are the ones who are surrendering our divinity and engaging that compact by playing into it, by acknowledging it, by standing under it, by understanding it, by paying tithe to it, by acceding and acknowledging it in every way, shape, and form in our lives, by wearing watches on our stupid wrists, by looking at the stupid clock in the top right-hand corner of the stupid computer, which is also indentured into the fiction of time. And thus everything on earth that can harvest our attention, like telephones, television screens, vehicles that we're driving, the airplanes, the information coming on screens, almost every single screen, digital screen that's beaming back to hundreds of millions of human beings every nanosecond has got a time coded into it, connected to atomic clocks, connected into anchoring Babylonian, Vatican-inspired 1260 time signature into our fucking cells, into the mitochondria. We are being dream spelled by trillions of imprints of time through the digitization of our reality. That is throwing us further and further into the thrall of the kingdom of the devil, from which we cannot escape beyond a certain point unless we have absolute lucid consciousness in one perfect moment of timelessness. That one perfect moment is the sword of St. Michael. That is what breaks the Hermes veil. That is what then unleashes the divine immanent flow of our Christed being. That is what gives us supernatural power to stand and take the head off the Leviathan, or the many heads off the Leviathan. And God knows that Leviathan keeps growing heads like a Medusa every day of our lives, so long as we are on that noble journey, navigating the shadow of death and the valley of death. But it's all good, because in that noble walk, there is no fear, none whatsoever, none. You may have psychic premonitions. You may have a momentary knot in the stomach. You may have a little fight or flight reflex momentarily. Of course, this is muscle memory, but there is no foundational fear driving this being, none. And that becomes the cloak. That becomes the protection. That becomes all you ever need to be able to fulfill your divine function as a son or a daughter of God. I've gone into the abstruse to try to explain the majesty that emerges once we consciously uncouple and disidentify from the fiction of time, which is the coding of fear. Because time and fear are the same thing, and money becomes a 3D totem that embodies the manifest principle of time and fear, which is where money, usury, the Phoenicians, the priesthoods, the bankers, all of that crept into the model of the paradise. The Edenic privilege of the Garden of Eden was corrupted with this idea of time, and the idea and the principle of fear anchoring into the idea of time, and then manifesting as an accreted token of time and fear, which is money, becoming the thing that was then traded and exchanged by living beings to define and determine their lives, their livelihoods, their destinies, their fate, whether you can do something or not do something becomes determined by that coin. So, of course, then being able to co-opt and manipulate coinage becomes the work of the devil, which is what priest bankers are all about. The Catholic Church is predicated on tithes and usury, exploitation of people, flipping us into coin. And then, of course, it gets worse with the emergence of governments, which are how the devil became systematized, and then began the process of monetizing and securitizing human beings. All living systems are now securitized. Every fucking tree in a forest, one way or the other, is part of some carbon credit index in the Treasury Department. Every single human being on the face of the blessed earth has been indentured through spells and bonds and certifications and registrations into the same satanic enterprise, and thus it continues. So we have been the ones to fully abdicate and abnegate our divine sovereignty into the realm of the fiction. But it takes one lucid moment of consciousness in action to disidentify, uncouple, and become, at that moment in timelessness, start to become fearless. And with that fearlessness comes the most incredible benedictions. And then one is able to manifest the kingdom of heaven in one's own life by degrees, variously. It's a beautiful becoming. It's a beautiful revelation. And that's the great revelation that each of us are born to. So let's get on with it.
Timelessness is enlightenment, for sure. Surely.
Bravo.
And it's the enlightened man that doesn't fear. It's those who succumb to ignorance that are filled with fear. And that fear is manipulated by all the means that you just spoke about. money, especially this monetary system, which we have to transmute before we can become really free. You talked about 0 point economy. Do you want to expound on that a bit?
Oh, Christ. Yes. 0 point economy is you and I, by our own covenant, determining a prosperous and abundant model of reality, one which is based on affirmation, creative expansion, and which seeks remedy in all ways, and never conducts harm or causes injury. So that's not difficult. Every good human has that predisposition born into them at the cellular level. It's only when we're corrupted and then thwarted, dream spelled and spell bonded, that we move into different patterns of survivalism and reflexivity, which corrupt that angelic blueprint and indenture it into a false light matrix of reality. That's a great sadness, but it's one that also serves ultimately the journey of that soul. So there's no right or wrong or good or evil. Friedrich Nietzsche got that bit right. What to say? A 0 point social ecology is where we transmute money and turn it into a complex which places far more importance in abundance and prosperity, creativity, affirmation, and expansiveness in all ways, in all things, and steps away from sequestering and stockpiling and saving and hiding and couching and encrypting, which is why I despise crypto anything, because crypto this and crypto that is all part of the devil's language. Why, oh why, blessed Lord, would we move from a blood economy of the last 3,000 years into a crypto economy, which is all also on the devil's playground? I understand the rationale, and we could talk about that. But anyway, the point being, I'm an absolutist, and I think we need to move into absolutism. 0 point social ecology is where we engage our divinity, where we circumscribe a parameter of sacred soil, of living soil, and we claim the proper title there, allodial titles and universal sky titleage to the land holding. We beat the devil back if we need to, or blow its face off with our Christed laser, whatever it takes. But we establish jurisdiction, is what I'm saying. We establish jurisdiction under the living God. And we begin to plug and play into neg entropy, the opposite of entropy. We start to explore our genius and our supernature. We start to explore our immanent divine capacity for genius, for creating, designing, manifesting, embodying, enacting all that is beautiful, all that is noble, all that is divine. And in no time at all, that manifests in physicality as the kingdom of heaven on earth, which is precisely what we were born to do and to be. Once we've forgotten, and once we have consciously disidentified and then moved away and forgotten the old mythos, which is the parasite, the school teacher leaning over you and wagging a finger in your face and asking you to repeat the 7 times table, or your parents coming in and bushwhacking you for not passing the fetid examination to become a this or become a that. When the community and the society within which you were born is no longer leaning in with surgical blades, snipping off your fucking genitalia, or doing whatever other devilish rites it elects to itself as a fundamentalist Muslim or Christian or Hindu or Buddhist. Once we have consciously disidentified from all of that mind fuckery and engaged the living flame of the living Christ, the living Godhead, That, my friend, is what a 0-point social ecology is. We should move beyond words like social and society altogether. We should move beyond words like economy and ecology altogether. They are also redolent of a pretty diabolical pathology of Greco-Roman spellbinding. We don't need or want to be defining our limitless, ineffable, divine geometry into little boxes. Why would we want to do that? So that's the answer to the question. A little enigmatic, but it is where our divine supernature takes over from a programmed Atlantean death spiral.
It is the future, inevitably. We have to get away from this grid that we're on, this slavery, really. And you're talking about self-sufficiency on the land, obviously.
Oh, yes. So let's drill into the pragmatics. Yes, the self-realization is all about that. I mean, that's why I talk about living sons and daughters of God and the living soil. You know, we have to resurrect, restore the relationship between the hominid, the human being, and the sacred soil, because it's that very relationship that was disrupted by government. So the Catholic Church, all churchish and religious dogma and doctrine was geared toward dislocating the relationship between the people and the soil. And that's where the bans and the tithes came in with the churches, which seemed innocuous back in the Middle Ages, but were not innocuous at all. They were setting the stage, baby, for 1066. You know, 1066 was setting the stage for the great harvest of humanity through numbers and alphabet. Yeah. Spells and bonds, yeah. and we became indentured in that way. But a resurrection of the relationship of the living men and women of the living soil becomes integral now. It's the only thing that matters. And so, yes, we have, 1,000 acres here which is already growing many crops, and we look now to, in the next 3 years, to grow everything known to man as an experiment. I mean, we're doing that as an experiment to prove out that whether we're doing it in the black soil or we're doing it in greenhousing, we don't need the World Trade Organization. We don't need third-party intervention in trade and exchange. We can eat, we can eat Madagascan apricots here, and we can grow them here. We don't need to be shipping. We don't need all of that weights and measures and commerce and trade and exchange, because that's really how the third-party interventionism came in and took ownership of everything.
Yeah, well, you're in the tropics, which is so abundant. It's so suitable for human beings, which I believe is our natural habitat. So there's nothing you can't do in that kind of an environment.
That's right. That's exactly correct. But I don't want to sway the conversation too far into these esoteric areas. But I can tell you that based on my I think fairly substantial knowledge in this arena, the whole world at a given point will restore into a sort of median subtropical climate. The Earth is an external manifestation of the collective consciousness of all the sentient creatures that scuttle around on the surface of the plane, as well as within the vessel of the Earth. And the fact of the matter is that climate corresponds to weather, cloud formations, rain, storms, hurricanes. All of that corresponds directly to the geometry of the collective conscious and unconscious elements of sentient beings. And that's just the way it is. We're just being very, very stupid.
We control the weather. There's no doubt.
The weather is a manifestation of us in that sense. So if we're serious about, climate change, well, then fucking change, baby. Change yourself.
Exactly.
And first start by taking a fucking stick to Al Gore and Leonardo DiCaprio and all these other mundane idiots who pump out the same luciferic nonsense as it relates to climate. But that's the point. The point is a living relationship, a syntropic, symbiotic restoration of relationship between the living men and women and the living soil becomes the ignition point of the true revelation and of the second coming, which is the Christed light emanating from within and from without, Alpha Omega.
Yes. Talk about bioarchitecture.
So bioarchitecture is just a cute coining of a phrase that indicates the intelligent application of form, shape, form, light in a built environment, as it should correspond to the living system, whether that living system is a pot plant or an oak tree, or it's a human being, or a cat or a dog. The fact of the matter is that we need to understand that part of the great dystopian death spiral in our civilizational model occurred and manifested as a breach in understanding how to build things and create a built environment, which was biodynamic or bioresonant, because a bioresonant vessel or vehicle creates a feedback loop into the living system that's placed within it, whether it's a pot plant, a cat or a dog or a human being. So we want to live long, and we want to prosper, and we want to be well, and we want to be in as beautiful a state of mind, body, and soul as possible. And if you want to truly accomplish that, then you have to quieten the monkey mind and the systems-based Atlantean logic. Stop building things in squares and straight lines with right angles, because the right angle right there is the psychic trap. The one behind me there is an abomination to me. So I can see that even whilst I'm on a conversation with you. The abomination for me is the cluster of the right angle there, because that's a psychic trap. Elementally, it actually harms me personally, because I'm very conscious of the built
Well, you're
state.
sensitive to your environment. Indeed.
Bioresonance, bioarchitecture is where we start to architect a world that does not allow for these psychic traps, or at least it circumvents and bypasses them wherever humanly possible. And that can manifest as what we've done in Bali, which is world famous now at Akasha, with the Juan Schlosser of bioarchitects usage of bamboo forms. I've designed the master architecting out there. It's all done by me over 18 years now, a long time I've been at it, and I'm trained at it. But learning spatial dynamics, spatial harmonics, understanding the interplay of light and sound and of form and of element, the wind, the rain, the blah, blah, blah. One only learns that by doing what the Cherokee and the Hopi were practiced at, which is stilling the breath and listening to the pulse of the earth. So a good architect or engineer will always go and sit on the grass or under a tree or by the river and just shut up. Or go to sleep, and that's where the equation or the algorithm emerges. When the prayer is fashioned aright, it'll be answered by the God in your own heart. And we must approach the architecting and the engineering of this new kingdom of heaven with that sanctity in mind.
Yeah, from the time I was a little kid, sharp edges always bothered me. I used to doodle ovoids when I still do actually. Ovoids and threes. It seems to it makes for a much better energy flow. It seems that energy is getting caught up in these corners, and it's not in. We won't find those sharp edges in nature, really. To that degree.
Well, you'll find them. You'll find them with a paper thorn, trust me, or a rose thorn. But your point is correct. Actually, you just don't get those. But curiously enough, you do get them with certain elements. So if you're looking at striations of crystals or of geological formations, that's a correct and appropriate situation for straight lines and angles and geometry, and that's where it should occur. But outside of that, absolutely correct. We just need to look at what we see out there and comport ourselves in accordance with that language.
What do you see coming up in the next few months? How's it looking to you?
Well, I think if I put my 3D humanoid helmet on, it's terrifying. It's a terrifying specter of inordinate death spiral mechanics playing out in the human family, connected to the degree to which so many of our fellows volunteered themselves up for sacrifice to Moloch in recent weeks and months and years. I'm not judging that revelation. I'm just suggesting that to those with the eyes to see, there's a deep sadness there. There is also a perfection to it. Bifurcation is bifurcation. Phase resonance is phase resonance. Being masked or unmasked to your own reason and conscience and divinity is what it is. It is masked or unmasked. Do the math. It's not complicated. This is what the reckoning is and what the reckoning means. Divine geometry and the number that issues through the hand of God, so to speak, is absolute science. There is no room for fuzzy logic. There is no gray area. This is black or white. This is masked or unmasked. And this is why we collectively manifested this great epochal shaming of ourselves, because we needed to collectively detox from so much civilizational, incarnational, generational shame that we've carried. What was the shaming all about? It was always about only one thing, which is the fact that we have, in the so-called past, chosen to obscure ourselves from our immanent divine nature. And we have collectively determined that that is the end of that. We now move into the immanent divine template of perfection. We restore the kingdom of heaven on earth. The angelic seeding within the atom seed of the pulse of Homo sapiens sapien now becomes the emergent pulse of a Christed Homo luminous. We are taking it from here. There will not be any death spiral mechanics or Babylonian priesthoods moving forward. There will not be any artifice or checkerboard, binary, dualistic logic of the devil moving forward. We are the determiners of that syntropic synthesis of becoming. And it's a beautiful thing. In point of fact, it is arguably the genesis of the greatest galactic orgasm ever encountered or countenanced in the cosmos. That's what I see for those of us who are walking the walk. And that's when I've taken off my mortal 3D human helmet and I see what's really real.
For those who have made a certain choice, what about for the others? I mean, obviously people are enmeshed in this Rockefeller medicine. What's the fate of these people? Not just Rockefeller medicine, but the whole materialistic trap, this whole creation, as you say, of the devil, which it absolutely is. It's actually just our lower consciousness, right? Which has manifested this entire situation. And we've been faced with this adversary because as a race, we've proven that we can't learn these lessons in any other way. So
apparently so. Apparently you're correct about that. I mean, the voices of the great and the good out there are abundant and plentiful. I am blessed, so blessed to have met with definitely most of the brave frontline voices in health science, medical science, military intelligence, who are all speaking to truth and disclosure.
Yeah, it's there.
I'm blessed to have moved amongst so many of them and continue to do so. And I can tell you that emergent pulse corresponds also with the pulse of Middle America that I went to identify for myself last year on a 3-month Arise tour. So I know that the leadership pulse and the emergent leadership pulse, and I'm talking about emerging congressional, senatorial leaders, political leaders, ecclesiastical leaders, cultural leaders, thought leaders, military intelligence leaders, all the whole gamut. The pulse of that emergent leadership and echelon of leadership corresponds absolutely with the emergent pulse of Middle America, which codifies and exemplifies the pulse of Middle Earth, of humankind. And I can tell you that when you tap into that pulse and lean into that, Mark, you hear only this angelic revelation. So it's all good in that sense. There is nothing to fear. There is everything to be ecstatic about. But just steel yourself. One needs to steel oneself. We need to steel ourselves and embolden ourselves, because we're just moving through this end game detritus, and there are a few rocks and shards of glass flying around. And but then that becomes the perfect Zen mastery in terms of mindfulness and just being very mindful.
It's the adversity that we seem to need in this point in our evolution.
Apparently, yeah.
Obviously, you're an artist. Tell us about the importance of beauty.
Beauty becomes the tapestry of images, symbols, icons, colors, geometry that we are able to cogitate with the mortal brain, with the human brain. That is the anchor point to the divine, to the immanent, to the patterns of perfection, which ultimately self-reveal, self-fulfill, and self-exist as the kingdom of heaven on earth, which is what we will soon experience at the collective level. But beauty and the elevation of beauty and the need for the elevation of art and beauty and consciousness as a synthesis is a living medium of being able to continue to aspire toward purposing one's own life and attention toward patterns of perfection, which is to say, to be in service, because somebody who understands art and simply puts attention onto beauty in the appropriate way, in the non-acquisitional way. You're not seeking to own a Picasso painting or a John Constable painting, but you're able to love it, and you're able to appreciate great beauty, great Venusian architecture, or whatever, Sumerian fucking petroglyphs. It doesn't matter. If one is able to observe beauty and appreciate it truly, as every good grandmother can and does, with a little posy of flowers, that is where we anchor our cogitating mortal brain into the hyperdimensional realms that allow for the induction or transduction of the kingdom of heaven to earth. So beauty and art in that sense cannot be overstated, or the importance of them cannot be overstated. But it's also why humans have a natural tendency toward perfection. The reason why, a beautiful woman is exemplified walking down the street, or on a magazine cover, is because the geometry of her features corresponds and comports to certain divine laws, whether you're talking Fibonacci spiral or M-set mathematics. That's what it is. And people know, it doesn't matter how beautiful or ugly you are, we're all hardwired with an understanding of what those patterns of perfection generally look and feel like. So we know what a beautiful horse looks like, and we know what an ugly donkey looks like. There's a distinction, a huge distinction. And the travesty, of course, is that humans then move toward idolatry and
idolatrizing beauty.
Yes, and then once you've done that, you've desecrated it, absolutely desecrated it. And the curiosity there is that that's where the donkey or the ass becomes the beautiful subject, because it is actually as beautiful in the real sense. But not forgetting that beauty and the understanding of beauty is simply an anchor point to the patterns of perfection. Now, trust me, the Babylonian priesthood have known this for millennia, which is why they have been and gone to such great lengths to erect and construct and engineer Gothic temples and cathedrals and synagogues and all the rest of it, stained glass and all this incredible architectural wonderment has been inflicted, in a sense, against humanity in order to indenture the attention and get the poor peasants to load up their ox carts with their tithes and make their way into the citadel, and because the roads are paved with gold there apparently, and that's
They've
how
weaponized it.
Totally. And that's how the cityscape emerged, through the cathedral. And the cathedral, incidentally, let's just remember something here. The cathedral invariably was not built when they said it was. It could predate by thousands of years and was buried in mud. And only the spire of the real Tartarian pyramid is on the surface. But that was refashioned to look as though it is that. So you might find that many of these buildings that are historical buildings today go underground hundreds and hundreds of feet. In fact, we know that those discoveries and revelations are now being made with many of them. Look at the Mosque of St. Peter's in Russia, in Moscow, look at St. Catherine's. All of these amazing cathedrals and synagogues and mosques around the world, the really big ones, the ancient ones, are mostly, if not all, vestiges of an ancient narrative that the Babylonian priest came in and flipped into religiosity. But actually, if you understand the bells and you understand the mathematics of those incredible edifices, those structures, they were actually life-enhancing, life-affirming technologies that breathed through the sound of the bells and through the angles of light and capacitance and charge that these technologies, these huge technologies, represented actually free energy systems. You look at the star forts emerging all around the world. Same thing, the pyramids emerging all around the world. So we're beginning to now see through that glass darkly that we've been lied to in an unheralded fashion by the status quo. And that's just terrific, because what emerges from beyond the Hermes veil that we're piercing right now will keep us very occupied and very enchanted for a very long time.
It's a deep science. It's a deep metaphysical science, which has been hidden from us, really.
Indeed.
Well, Sacha, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your work, and thanks for coming on today to speak with us.
Thank you, Mark. It was lovely meeting you. I'm very happy to have spoken to
you
you.
too.
God bless you. Bye-bye.